Hi, I'm Garth McKenzie from traderscorner.co.za. This is your weekly look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 indices. So we begin the week with a look at the S&P 500 chart. This is specifically the daily chart that we're taking a look at over here. And what you can see is that the market has generally been a little bit range bound over the last few weeks. There's lateral support down in the region between 2950 and 3000. Last night, the market did just reach that 3,000 level and reversed up off of that area. At the upper end, at about 3150, there's some overhead resistance there as well. The underside of the 15-period exponential moving average, which is the shortest term moving average on this chart, comes in at about 3080, and there's a fair amount of resistance there, which we'll also look at on the hourly chart in a moment. The last thing to point out on this daily chart is that the RSI, the Relative Strength Index, is holding above 50, only just at the moment, but that is an indication that the general rising trend is still intact, but that is obviously being threatened at the moment with the market, with the RSI testing that 50 level quite a few times in the last few days. Then if we move forward to the hourly chart of the S&P 500, there you can see the lateral support area, which comes in at about 2975. As I mentioned last night, the market did trade down to 3,000. It just tagged that level, and then it managed to reverse up quite nicely off the lows and ended on the session high. There's resistance up at 3080, as I mentioned, from the previous couple of days. And then above that at about 3100, there's more resistance as well. There's a confluence of moving averages coming in there on that hourly chart at 3080. So we need to watch that resistance area quite carefully. So for the time being, I think we're range bound. 3080 is the resistance area, 2975, 3000, that sort of region is support. And the market, broadly speaking, seems to be going sideways at the moment without any particular clear trend in either direction. If we then move forward to the Nasdaq, this is the daily chart of the Nasdaq that we take a look at first up. What's quite clearly evident here is this market still is stronger than the S&P 500. So the tech sector generally still leading the gains, broadly speaking, in the US at the moment. The upward channel that has been intact since the middle of April is still very much intact there. You can see last night a nice bullish reversal candle formed off the bottom of that channel at about 9,800. And as long as that low at 9,800 remains defended, then there's a chance that this index still can push up a little bit higher towards the upper end of that channel once again. If we zoom in then to the hourly chart of the Nasdaq, here you can see again that rising channel that I spoke about still very much intact. And there are a series of nice continuation patterns in that rising trend that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Most recently, you can see there's a falling wedge pattern on the right-hand side of that chart. That is typically a bullish continuation pattern in a rising trend. And if this market were to break out to the upper end of that rising wedge, of that falling wedge pattern rather, then that could quite easily signal that this index goes back up to the prior top at about 10,300. As long as the index can hold above 9,800, call it 9,700, that region, then I think the bullish bias is still very much intact here. Only if the market starts to take out the lows that we saw earlier this week at around about 9,700, just above that region, then perhaps it signals further selling down towards the 9,400 region on the Nasdaq. But for the time being, the bulls still hold the upper hand here, and one's still got to expect that the higher likelihood is that we'd see a break to the upper end of that falling wedge structure and potential for a retest of those prior highs. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back again next week with some more market analysis and another look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq.